Adding fractions. Now this should be a review of what you've covered in grade 7, but if you've never seen this before, this is a good opportunity to learn it for the first time, I guess. So, adding fractions. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to find equivalent fractions with a common denominator. Okay. Once we've found that common denominator and we've got our equivalent fractions, we're just going to add the numerators. And we do all that work to find a common denominator, so that denominator is just going to stay common. Once we've added the numerators, we're going to put into lowest terms and then change improper fractions to mixed numbers. So you'll probably notice that this last step is really the same as what we're always checking with multiplying and dividing. So with fractions, really we always want to check that it's in lowest terms and get anything that's improper back into mixed. Okay, so let's look at what this actually looks like. If I've got 1/3 plus 1/2, so if I was to look at 1/3, and let's say I was to take this pi and split it into thirds, and I'll do my best. So let's say I've got thirds there, okay, and if I had one of those thirds colored in, that would look like that. Well, if I wanted to then take that 1/3 and add half, my pieces aren't really split into halves right now. So if I was to add a half, I would kind of have to go like this and kind of create a new line, right? And then I would color in half would now be colored in green. So what have I really colored in total now? So you might notice that when I cut that made my cut going along this way to split it in half, I kind of cut my third that is sitting in this section right here, I kind of cut that third into two smaller sections. Okay, and so what that's done, what I'm going to do is using my common denominator, I'm really going to be finding what I've split that section into, right? Because I split it into smaller pieces. So that's really all we're doing. So, to find common denominators, so I got to find a common denominator for 3 and for 2. So what I would do is I would start by thinking of the multiples of 3. So multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, and I could keep going. There's lots of other lots of other multiples I can keep doing there. For the second fraction, I look at the denominator of 2, so I'm going to find my multiples of 2. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and I could keep going. And what I'm looking for is a multiple that is the same for both values. So when I look, the first ones I got 3 and 2, those don't match, right? And then I've got a 4, and then I've got a 6, and I go, wait a minute, 6 and 6. It appears in both lists. So 6 is a multiple of both of those numbers. And I do also have 12, so there are going to be lots of common multiples I could find. The next one would be 18 if I continued doing my list. And what I want is the lowest common multiple. So that's what I'm going to use. So I need to turn 3 into a 6. How do I do that? Well, 6 is the second number in my list, right? So 3 is the first, 6 is the second number in my list. So what I'm going to do to the 3 is I'm going to multiply it by 2. Now because I want to keep my fraction equivalent, I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator both by 2. So now I've changed 1/3 to be 2/6. Okay? For the 2, I want to change my 2 into a 6, and I see that 2 is the first number, 4 is the second number, 6 is the third number. So that means I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 3. So now 1/2 could be rewritten as 3/6. Okay? So my question now looks like 2/6 plus 3/6. And in total, that gives me 2 plus 3. The denominator is going to stay as a 6. We did all that work down here figuring out what that common denominator of 6 was, so it's going to stay as a 6. Notice that the denominator, once I've got it matching, stays the same. Okay? And then the numerator, 2 plus 3 is 5, so we get 5/6. Okay? And that kind of makes sense because if we look at what I had in the drawing here, my 1/3, if I was to cut it into 2 pieces, I now have 2 pieces colored in red, right? And I've got a numerator of 2. And if I look at my green section, the green section has this cut right here, and then if I cut this way again, I now have 1, 2, 3 sections colored in green. And in total now, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections in my circle. And that's where my denominator comes in. Okay, so that's really all we're doing is we're adding two different sizes of pieces together. So we have to cut those pieces into smaller chunks so that they are the same size. Notice how this one is the same size as this one, and the same size as this one, and the same, so they're all the same size now. Okay, that's what we're doing when we're adding fractions. And this is why adding fractions is just more difficult than multiplying and dividing. Multiplying and dividing, we don't have to worry about finding common denominators. So for this one, I got 7 over 8 plus 1/4. So I'm going to look at my multiples of 8. So I've got 8, 16, 24, and I could keep going. I'm going to stop because 4 is a smaller number here. So let's go with 4. Starting with 4, 8, 12, 16, and I go, wait a minute. They're both the same at 8. They also have a common multiple of 16, but 8 is the smallest common multiple. They would also have a common multiple at 24 and 32 and 40, but 8 is the smallest of them. Okay, so I need to turn 8 into an 8. Well, it already is an 8. So if you already have that number, is the denominator you want, just leave it. No need to change it. 8 looks great. But I need to change this 4 into an 8. How do I do that? Well, 8 is the second number, and that means 4 times 2 is going to give me 8. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 2, and so now I have 2 over 8. Okay? Adding together, my denominator is going to stay as an 8. We did all that work. Up top, 7 plus 2, and that gives me 9 over 8. The last thing I would do, make sure it's in lowest terms, so 8 and 9 have no common factors, but 8 could go into 9 one full time, and then I would have one piece left over as my remainder, so it's the same as 1 and 1 over 8. Okay, what about 5 over 6 plus 3/8? So again, let's look for our common denominator. If you want to pause it and check for your own, go ahead. So we've got 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and we could keep going. We'll see if we need to. Let's look at our 8. So 8, we've got 8, 16, 24, and at that point I want to stop because I see 24 is the same for both of them. So 24 is my common denominator. Okay, so how do I change the 6 into 24? Well, 24 is the 1, 2, 3, 4th number in that list, so that means 6 times 4. Do that same thing, top and bottom, and that gives me now 20 over 24. And for 8, to turn it into 24, it's 1, 2, 3, so it's the third number in the list. So I'm going to times top and bottom by 3, and that gives me 9 over 24. Adding these together, I have 20 plus 9 over 24, and that gives me 29 over 24. 24 goes into 29 one full time, and then there would be 5 pieces remaining. 5 and 24, no common factors, so it's in lowest terms. Now, what do we do if we've got mixed numbers? This is going to be a personal choice for you. I will show you two different methods. You can either, as we did before, you could change mixed to improper as our first step. Now, I actually kind of like that method in this sense because we are going to be doing bed mass, so order of operations, so multiplying and dividing are going to be mixed in there as well, and those ones you can't deal with mixed numbers, you need improper fractions, so probably not a bad idea to just go change mixed to improper. Okay, now sometimes that's counterintuitive to do, okay, because we can do it in a slightly simpler way. So I am going to look at doing both methods, and I'll try to be fast. So this one here, I got 1 3/5, so I'm going to change that mixed number into improper. So that's going to be 1 times 5 plus 3, and my denominator is still a 5. So that's going to give me now, I've got 8 over 5. And then looking at my second fraction here, I've got 2 times 4 plus the 1, the denominator stays as a 4, and that's going to give me now 9 over 4. Now I'm still adding these two things together, and I need a common denominator for my 5 and my 4. So a common denominator for 5 and 4 should be 20. So I'm not going to go through this one step by step. If you need to write it out, go ahead. So that's going to give me over 20. I've got 32 over 20. And then I've got, here I've got 45 over 20. And I'm going to add those two values together. So the disadvantage of doing it like this, where I change the mixed numbers to improper, is I definitely get larger values in the numerator, so it can be a little bit more difficult to work with. Okay, so this one here, 32 plus 45, gives me 77 over 20. I know 20 can go into 77 3 full times, because 3 times 20 is 60. And then I would be 17 short of getting to my next whole number. So I have 3 and 17 over 20. Now that's how you're doing it if you're going to convert your mix to improper. Now this is probably the more intuitive way, is I'm going to look at just taking my two whole numbers and adding them together. So I'm going to split this up. I've got 1 plus 2, okay, where I just look at my whole numbers first. And then I'm going to add on to that the fraction portion. And the fraction portion is 3 over 5 plus 1 over 4. So I'm going to look at my whole numbers first, and then look at my fractions second, and combine them together. Okay? So what we're going to do here, 1 plus 2 is 3. Now 3 over 5 plus 1 over 4, so I would need to rewrite with a equivalent fractions with a common denominator. So 3 over 5, I'm going to change that over to 20. So that's going to multiply by 4, numerator and denominator. 1/4 over 20 is going to become 5 over 20. Okay, now 12 over 20 plus 5 over 20 is 17 over 20. So I had my 3 for my whole numbers, and I got 17 over 20 for my fractions. And then I'm going to add the 3 and the 17 over 20 to just get 3 and 17 over 20. And I just combine them back together. Okay? You're more than welcome to do that. It absolutely works. Subtracting, though, we would have to be a little bit more careful. Okay, so there's adding fractions. Hopefully that was a review for you, because you should have covered that one last year.